We also learned today from a parliamentary committee that the government is not focused enough on the long-term effects of extreme weather and climate change. Joining me now to discuss this is Jim Dell, author of 2 books, Whether or Not and How to Prepare for Extreme Weather, to talk about the personal and commercial impacts of weather and climate. Jim, I was getting your plug in there.
Yeah,
you almost didn't read the rest of it. So tell us your latest book, 25th of April, How to Survive Extreme. It's a survivor's guide to the extreme weather we're seeing, isn't it?
So this is the book, and you can pre-order it, but it's 25th of April it comes out. It's been co-authored, so this is co-authored with Michael Hawke, who's a survivalist, a bit like Bear Grylls in the United States. So it's a US book, but it's there to... It's there for not just for climate reasons. Make this absolutely clear. Okay. This is for any type of extreme weather that you might find yourself in.
We've got the plug-in. So if you're in Dubai at the moment, where we've seen extraordinary
I'm glad you mentioned it.
Of flooding, you'd want that book in your hand luggage. There we go. Right, plug dealt with. Let's talk about the Public Accounts Committee.
Yeah.
We've been quite critical of the government, really saying, particularly after the COVID pandemic, it's moved from long-term flood planning to a much more short-termist approach. What do you think they mean by that?
I think this is a long time coming, and I don't think it's just happened yesterday. There's been sort of whispers and stuff going on for some time in terms of the government not moving fast enough. And to be frank with you, in the job that I do, I can quite see it, obviously. And you've mentioned Dubai, so let's just focus on that. That is a major city, a modern city that basically fell apart in a 24-hour period with incessant amount of rain. That didn't just happen because it was a normal event, and it did not happen because of cloud seeding. Make that absolutely clear. That is not the case. This happened because of an event, a low-pressure event, intense thunderstorms, 2 air masses meeting, intense thunderstorms, slow-moving, so it put down a year to a year and a half's rain across that area and beyond, by the way, into Oman and other places where people lost their lives. It just shows how a modern city like Dubai, and if anybody's ever been to Dubai, you'll understand how modern it is in terms of their infrastructure, etc., could not cope.
How their lifestyle almost hangs by a thread and can be broken by these extreme weather events.
Yeah.
Moving closer to home, though, we've had, I think, the wettest winter on record. But I also see that this year is an El Nino year around the world. Do you think those two things are linked, or is this weather, these more extreme weather events, part of the wider climate change that we're seeing across
You
the
have to put the two together. El Nino is a part of the equation. It's no use climatologists or meteorologists saying that's not part of the equation.
But we do, when it is an El Nino year, just for our viewers at home, we do get more of these wetter, warmer weather events.
You get extended droughts, you get extended floods, depending on where they are. But I think we've got to go back more than 1 year. El Nino has been running for about a year and a bit, and in fact, it's just died. So there we go. That one's no more. And we'll wait for the La Nina next to come up, which has got its own flavours in terms of more hurricanes, etc. But yeah, it does add to the pile. But this is the point. Climate change per se, in terms of a storm, that storm would have happened anyway. It's just exacerbated by climate change because of the energy that's transferred into the ocean and the atmosphere, which is why heat is the big elephant in the room as far as what climate does and how it operates.
Do you think there's criticism of the government by Meg Hillier in the Public Accounts Committee that the government is thinking very short term and should be thinking in a multi-decadal way? I believe the report says. That's all well and good, and of course no one's going to disagree with that. But of course, all of these changes are going to be paid for by taxpayers. Governments really only look in 4 or 5 year time horizons because we're a democracy. So if we were somewhere like Dubai or China, it would be much easier because we just, they don't have the same democratic accountability. How do we get politicians to start talking about this in a longer term?
You've got to look at the costs involved, because you just mentioned the cost going forward, and we've got to put a lot of money into to prevent this, and we're only a small place. And what about China? We hear all these arguments. You've got to do, there's got to be a little bit of what you might call self-interest in terms of that side of things. Do your best individually, and then collectively, and I think that's what anybody would do in any walk of life. So I think that this committee's correct in terms of highlighting this. We're not moving fast enough. We need to move faster, and the costs on the other side of the incidents, which is where I'm going with this, are going to far outweigh the costs of the preparedness and the mitigation.
But is it, and finally, and then I'm going to bring our panel in, but is it possible, because I often hear this debate where people say, Look, you just cannot use engineering to get yourself out of climate change.
No. You cannot. I mean, I
so what do we do then? I mean, it's a bold statement. What can we do?
It's a lot of
Apart from buy your
pieces.
book.
You can do, and the reason for that is that within this there's a lot of what you might call common sense, common sense stuff. In other words, you see cars going down a flooded road and suddenly they're floating away, whether they be Ferraris or Rolls Royces in Dubai or not. The point is that a lot of this is education, common sense. What do you do? And by the way, that doesn't cost a lot. That really does not cost a lot. So you can get that into schools, colleges, universities. Teach them how to not just mitigate, but to, how they actually operate within a climate-affected
So
place.
sort of civilian preparedness and society. Stella, do you feel that you have the right information from the government about being prepared for extreme weather and climate events?
No, I really don't. And I say that because I grew up in Greece in an area where we had a lot of earthquakes when I was growing up, and we continue to do so. And so in school, we were always taught how to react to an earthquake. I don't feel like for extreme weather conditions we have had similar education, and I'm not aware of exactly what's going on at schools, but I don't think the general public does.
I think it was extreme flooding in Athens, wasn't there? Late
Yes,
last year?
yes, and there is extreme flooding, and not just in Athens.
You also had the wildfires.
The wildfires that we have every single year, and every single year it continues being a problem, and you continue having people who are in rural areas being really, really scared because Greece is not the country that has the infrastructure to deal with this. And I don't think that the UK is much better in a lot of these issues.
Well, I think what's really important, as Jim says, is about common sense. I think what we shouldn't do is let the kind of, culture war about climate change get in the way of sensible preparedness so that we can all know what to do, because extreme weather is happening, whatever you think the cause is, and we need to be prepared. So let's not let, the getting rid of net zero or going for net zero get in the way of teaching people how to react when things happen and impact them.
And do you think, Matthew, this is something we can start to incorporate into the curriculum in schools?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me there are absolutely and sensible things that we can do. Maybe that's actually a more sensible thing to do in schools than some of the sort of climate campaigning. Rather than getting school children to do posters about, to back Greta, maybe it's better to think about what they can do in their community when they get hit by extreme weather.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing called passive greening, which sounds like not a lot. I go into studios and look around sometimes in the green rooms and places like that, and it's always like plastic plants, this, that, the other. Thinking, OK, look, you can mitigate temperature, for example. I go running in a woods next to me or walking in the woods, and on a hot day like we had in 2022, 40 degrees, it's 10 degrees cooler in those woods. Yeah. Very, very simple things can alleviate some of the problems. So, for example, in southern Spain, and maybe in Greece as well, houses painted white, to offset the heat. Wouldn't take a lot to paint some of these roofs in London, for example, where we're standing here, to mitigate some of that.
By law, on the islands, on the islands, they have to be painted white.
Yeah,
a traditional lime wash thing, and actually,
not going to cost a fortune.
Not a big thing to do.